Captain Taman stood on the command deck of his massive warship and looked out at the stars with cold red eyes. His ship was called Death's Shadow, and it was the most feared vessel in the entire galaxy. The ship was 3 miles long and covered in thick black armor that could stop any weapon known to exist. Giant cannons stuck out from its sides like the teeth of some ancient monster from the depths of space. T-Min was a Vorthek, and the Vorthek were the most terrifying species anyone had ever seen. He stood 12 feet tall on powerful legs that could crush steel. His arms were thick as tree trunks and ended in hands with claws sharp enough to cut through metal like paper. His skin was covered in dark green scales that were harder than the best armor any other species could make. When he opened his mouth, rows of razor-sharp teeth gleamed in the dim light of the command center, but it was his eyes that truly marked him as a predator. They glowed like red coals in the darkness and could see perfectly even when there was no light at all. Those eyes had seen the destruction of 47 worlds. They had watched entire civilizations bow down in terror when they realized the Vorthek had come for them. For 3,000 years, the Vorthek had ruled the galaxy through pure fear. Every species knew their name and trembled when they heard it whispered in the dark corners of space stations and trading posts. Parents told their children stories about the Vorthek to make them behave. Military commanders used the threat of Vorthek invasion to unite their people. Even the bravest warriors in the galaxy would rather face a black hole than fight a single Vorthek soldier. The command deck around Taman was filled with his crew of 200 Vorthek warriors. Each one was a perfect killing machine trained from birth to destroy and conquer. They moved with the smooth, deadly grace of natural-born hunters. Their claws clicked against the metal floors as they worked at their control stations. The sound was like the ticking of a countdown to death for whatever world they were. Approaching Young-Ho, the second-in-command, walked up to Taman with a datapad in his massive clawed hand. Young-Ho was slightly smaller than his captain, but no less dangerous. His scales were darker and his eyes burned with an even brighter red glow. He had personally led the ground assault on 23 worlds and had never lost a single battle. "Captain, we have found something interesting," Young-Ho said in the deep, growling voice that all Vorthek used when they spoke. His words came out like the rumble of distant thunder before a deadly storm. T-Min turned his massive head toward his lieutenant. The movement was slow and deliberate, like a giant predator deciding whether something was worth eating or just killing for fun. "What have our scouts discovered?" he asked. Young-Ho held up the datapad and activated a holographic display. The image showed a small blue and green planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. It looks like water and land masses covered most of its surface. Small white clouds swirled around it in pretty patterns that almost made it look peaceful and innocent. "A new world," Captain Young-Ho said with excitement in his voice. "The scouts report that it is inhabited by a species that calls themselves humans. They live on a planet they call Earth in a small system at the edge of the galaxy. Our intelligence says they are weak, soft creatures with no natural weapons or armor." T-Min studied the image of the planet with interest. It had been many months since they had found a new world to conquer. The crew was getting restless and eager for battle. A new conquest would keep them happy and add another world to the growing Vorthek Empire. "Tell me more about these humans," Taman commanded. Young-Ho smiled, and his teeth gleamed like white daggers in the red light of the command center. "They are small, Captain," he said, "only about 6 feet tall at most. They have soft pink or brown skin with no scales or natural armor. They have small teeth that look like they were made for eating plants instead of tearing flesh. They have no claws and their hands end soft rounded fingers." Taman laughed, and the sound echoed through the command center like the roar of some ancient beast. The other Vorthek warriors looked up from their work and smiled when they heard their captain laugh. It meant there would be a new battle soon and fresh worlds to conquer. "They sound pathetic," Young-Ho, Taman said. "What about their technology and weapons?" Young-Ho scrolled through more information on his datapad. "They have only recently developed space travel, Captain," he reported. "Their ships are slow and clumsy compared to ours. Their weapons appeared to be primitive energy projectiles and explosive devices, nothing that could even scratch our armor. Our scouts estimate that their entire military could not stand against a single. One of our assault team's T-min nodded with satisfaction. It would be another easy conquest just like all the others. The Vorthak had perfected the art of overwhelming weaker species through pure terror and superior firepower. They would appear in the skies above the human cities like death itself falling from the stars. The humans would see their massive ships blocking out the sun and know that resistance was hopeless. Then would come the ground assault. Vorthak warriors would pour from their landing craft like a tide of destruction. They would roar their battle cries and display their weapons and claws. The humans would scream and run in terror just like every other species had done. Within hours, the human leaders would surrender and beg for mercy. Within days, the planet would be another jewel in the Vorthak crown. How many humans live on this world? Taemin asked. Young Ho checked his data again. Approximately 8 billion, Captain, he said. They live in large groups called cities all across the planet's surface. The cities contain millions of humans each and would provide excellent opportunities to demonstrate Vorthak power. 8 billion, Taemin repeated thoughtfully. That was more than most worlds they had conquered, but it would also make the victory more impressive. When word spread that the Vorthak had conquered 8 billion beings in a single campaign, it would increase their reputation for being unstoppable. Excellent, Taemin said. Signal the fleet to change course for this Earth. We will add these humans to our empire and teach the galaxy once again why the Vorthak are the supreme species. Young Ho bowed his massive head. Yes, Captain, he said. Shall I prepare the standard invasion protocols? Taemin walked to the main viewing screen and looked out at the stars that seemed to part before their ship like they were afraid of its approach. Yes, he said. Full terror assault. I want every human on that planet to know that the Vorthak have come for them. I want them to understand what it means to face the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The command center erupted in excited growls and roars as the crew prepared for another conquest. Weapons were checked and sharpened. Armor was polished until it gleamed like black mirrors. Landing craft were loaded with supplies and ammunition. The great ship Death's Shadow changed course and began its journey toward the small blue planet, where 8 billion humans lived their peaceful lives completely unaware that death was coming for them from the stars. Tae-min smiled as he watched his crew work. Soon they would have another victory to add to their long list of conquests. Soon. The name Vorthak would bring terror to yet another species. Soon the galaxy would remember once again why they were the apex predators of space, and why no one could stand against them. He had no way of knowing that he was about to make the biggest mistake in Vorthak history. He had no idea that these soft, weak humans were about to teach him and his crew what real terror actually looked like. The galaxy's most feared predators were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous creatures are the ones that look the most harmless. 3 days later, the massive Vorthak fleet arrived at Earth like a storm of death and metal descending from the heavens above. 50 enormous warships dropped out of hyperspace and moved into position around the small blue planet. Each ship was larger than the biggest human cities and bristled with weapons that could turn mountains into glass. Captain Taemin stood on the bridge of Death's Shadow and watched through the main viewing screen as his fleet took their positions. The ships formed the perfect blockade around Earth, blocking out the sun over major population centers. Their black hulls reflected no light and seemed to swallow the stars. Themselves, the humans below must be screaming in terror by now, Taemin thought to himself. Every species reacted the same way when they saw Vorthak ships for the first time. First came the shock and disbelief. Then came the panic as millions of beings realized their world was about to be conquered. Finally came the desperate attempts to surrender before the shooting started. Young Ho approached his captain with a communication device in his clawed hand. Captain, he said, we are receiving transmissions from the planet's surface. The humans appear to be trying to contact us. Tae-min smiled and his razor-sharp teeth gleamed in the red light of the command center. Of course they are, he said. They want to beg for mercy before we demonstrate our power. Put them through. The main screen flickered and changed to show the surface of Earth. Tae-min expected to see crowds of panicking humans running through burning streets. Instead, he saw something that confused him greatly. A small group of humans was standing calmly in an open field near where the lead Vorthok ships had landed. They were holding white pieces of cloth on sticks and appeared to be completely relaxed. This is Earth Control calling the incoming vessels, a human voice said through the communication system. Welcome to our planet. We would like to arrange a meeting to discuss your visit. Tae-min stared at the screen in amazement. These humans were not screaming or running or begging for their lives. They were speaking in calm professional voices like they dealt with alien invasions every day of the week. Young-ho looked just as confused as his captain. Should we ignore them and begin the bombardment? He asked. No, Tae-min said slowly. I want to see these creatures up close before we destroy them. Perhaps they are too stupid to understand what is happening to them. Prepare a landing party. We will meet with these humans and show them what real terror looks like before we conquer their world. An hour later, Tae-min stood in the open field surrounded by 50 of his most fearsome warriors. Each Vorthok soldier wore full battle armor that made them look like walking nightmares. Their weapons were charged and ready to fire. Their claws were extended and their red eyes glowed with anticipation of violence. Across from them stood a small group of humans who looked ridiculously tiny by comparison. The largest human was barely 6 feet tall, while the smallest Vorthok warrior was over 10 feet. The humans wore simple clothing and carried no visible weapons. They looked like children standing next to giants. The human delegation was led by a female who introduced herself as So Young. She appeared to be some kind of diplomat based on her formal clothing and calm manner of speaking. Next to her stood a male called Dong Hyen, who carried several electronic devices and seemed to be studying the Vorthok with scientific interest. The third human was named Seung-woo and wore what appeared to be a military uniform, though he carried no weapons. Tae-min decided to start the meeting by demonstrating Vorthok superiority. He drew himself up to his full 12-foot height and let out the loudest, most terrifying roar he could produce. The sound echoed across the field like thunder, and could probably be heard for miles in every direction. It was a battle cry that had caused entire armies to flee in panic on dozens of worlds. Instead of falling to their knees in terror, the humans did something completely unexpected. Dong Hyen pulled out a small recording device and pointed it at Tae-min with obvious excitement. Fascinating vocalization patterns, he said to himself while watching the device screen. The frequency suggests they use fear as a primary communication tool. So Young remained perfectly calm and showed no sign of being impressed by the display. We understand you are here to conquer our planet, she said in a matter-of-fact tone. Before you begin, we would like to share some information about humanity that might interest you. Young-ho was so shocked by their reaction that he forgot to maintain his intimidating posture. These creatures were supposed to be terrified. They were supposed to be begging for mercy. Instead, they were acting like this was a normal business meeting. You will surrender now, Young-ho snarled while extending his claws to their full, frightening length. Or we will destroy your cities one by one until nothing remains of your pathetic species. Seung-woo, the military advisor, looked at Young-ho's claws and actually smiled. Destroy our cities, he said with amusement in his voice. That is cute. Do you know what humans do for fun? We invented something called extreme sports. People jump off cliffs with fabric wings, dive to the bottom of oceans for recreation, and climb the tallest mountains just because they exist. The Vorthok warriors looked at each other with confusion. These activities sounded like elaborate forms of suicide rather than entertainment. What kind of species would risk death for pleasure? So Young continued speaking, as if she had not noticed the growing bewilderment of the alien soldiers. We have been watching your approach for weeks, she said. Your technology is impressive, but we noticed some interesting things. Your ships use quantum plasma drives, which suggests you have mastered fusion technology. Your weapons appear to be particle-based energy systems. Your armor looks like reinforced bioorganic material. Tay-Min felt a chill run down his spine despite his thick scales. How did these primitive creatures understand Vorthak technology so quickly? They had been studying his fleet and analyzing their capabilities while he had dismissed them as helpless PR. I'm ITIVS. Dong Hyon stepped forward with his recording device still running. We have also been studying your species through our long-range sensors, he said with the enthusiasm of a scientist who had made an interesting discovery. You are apex predators from a high-gravity world, probably around 1.8 times Earth gravity. Your bone density suggests you evolved from pack hunters. Your red eyes indicate you hunt primarily at night or in low-light conditions. The Vorthak warriors began shifting nervously from foot to foot. These humans were not acting like prey at all. They were studying the Vorthak like scientists examining specimens in a laboratory. They were analyzing weaknesses and gathering intelligence. Instead of cowering in fear, Young Ho tried to regain control of the situation. Your analysis means nothing, he growled. We have conquered hundreds of worlds and destroyed countless fleets. No species in the galaxy can stand against Vorthak might. Is that so? Sung Woo asked with raised eyebrows. Tell us about these other species. You conquered? What were they like? Did they fight back or surrender immediately? Tay-Min thought about the question. The Trilaxians had been peaceful traders who valued commerce over warfare. The Zephyrians were artists and philosophers who barely had a military. The Melkoids were simple farmers who had never developed advanced weapons. None of them had been warriors by nature. They were civilized species, Tay-Min said with what he hoped sounded like pride rather than growing uncertainty. Exactly, Sung Woo replied, and his smile became somewhat predatory. You have been bullying peaceful civilizations, but humans. We have never been peaceful. We have been fighting for survival since the day we evolved. Every human child learns to fight. Every human adult knows that sometimes violence is the only answer. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Tay-Min began to suspect that he might have made a serious mistake. Sung Woo pulled out a flat electronic device that the humans called a tablet and activated its glowing screen. Since you are interested in conquest, he said with a calm voice that somehow sounded more dangerous than any Vorthak roar, let me show you what humans consider normal behavior. The device projected a three-dimensional image into the air above their small group. The Vorthak warriors leaned forward to see what these strange creatures wanted to show them. They expected to see human cities or perhaps their primitive weapons and defenses. Instead, they saw something that made no sense at all. The projection showed human soldiers in what appeared to be some kind of battle zone. Explosions were going off all around them, and deadly projectiles were flying through the air in every direction. But instead of running away from the danger or hiding like any sane creature would do, the humans were running toward the explosions and gunfire. The Vorthak watched in amazement as human soldiers carried their wounded comrades through deadly situations that should have killed them all. They saw humans throw themselves on top of explosive devices to protect their friends. They watched human medics run into active combat zones to rescue fallen soldiers while completely ignoring the fact that they could be killed at any moment. This is from our history, So Young explained with the same casual tone she might use to discuss the weather. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, not just against other humans but against nature itself. We have survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, and natural disasters that would make most species extinct. Young Ho tried to look unimpressed, but his tail was twitching nervously behind him. The tail twitch was a sign of anxiety that all Vorthak tried to hide during combat situations. The fact that he was showing this weakness meant the human images were affecting him more than he wanted to admit. The projection changed to show a different scene that was even more confusing than the first. This time it showed two humans inside some kind of enclosed area, deliberately hurting each other while thousands of other humans sat around the edges, cheering and shouting encouragement. The two fighters were bleeding from cuts on their faces and bodies, but they kept attacking each other with their bare hands. Wait, Taemin interrupted in disbelief. They hurt each other for entertainment. Oh, that is nothing, Donghayan said cheerfully, while adjusting his recording equipment. Show them the footage from the Australian continent. The new projection made the Vorthok warriors take several steps backward in shock. It showed humans swimming in vast oceans that were filled with massive creatures that had rows of razor-sharp teeth. The humans were not just swimming near these predators, but actually approaching them on purpose with nothing but thin masks over their faces to help them breathe underwater. The scene changed to show humans walking through burning hot deserts. That looked like they could kill any living thing within hours. But these humans were not just surviving in this deadly environment, they were hiking through it for fun while carrying heavy packs and smiling at cameras. Then came images of humans living alongside creatures that the Vorthok recognized as extremely venomous. Snakes that could drop a full-grown warrior with a single bite were being handled casually by human children. Spiders larger than a human hand were being allowed to crawl across human skin. Humans were swimming in waters where deadly jellyfish drifted like floating death. You mean, Young Ho asked in a voice that was getting higher with each word. Your planet is actively trying to kill you and you just live there anyway. Well, yes, So Young replied as if this was the most obvious thing in the universe. Where else would we live? Earth is our home. Sure, it is dangerous, but that just makes life interesting. Taemin was beginning to feel something he had never experienced before. His species had evolved on a relatively safe world where they were the dominant predators from the beginning. They had never faced serious environmental challenges or natural disasters. These humans had somehow survived and thrived on a world where everything seemed designed to kill them. The humans were not just survivors, though. The projections showed that they actually seemed to enjoy the danger. They were laughing and smiling, while doing things that would terrify most Vorthok warriors. They treated mortal peril like some kind of recreational activity. Seu smiled, and the expression looked far more predatory than any Vorthok grin. This is from our space program, he said while activating a new projection. We strap ourselves to controlled explosions and shoot ourselves into the vacuum of space. For science. The new image showed humans sitting on top of massive rockets that contained enough explosive power to level entire cities. These rockets were essentially controlled bombs that the humans rode into the deadly emptiness of space where there was no air to breathe and the cold would freeze them solid in seconds. But the most incredible part was that they did this regularly. The projection showed dozens of different launches with humans climbing into metal capsules and allowing themselves to be shot into space on pillars of fire and destruction. They did this not because they had to, but because they wanted to explore and learn about the universe around them. Several Vorthok warriors had gone pale under their scales. Their red eyes were wide with shock and disbelief. They were looking at the humans with a mixture of horror and something that might have been respect. Let me understand this correctly, Taemin said slowly. You live on a planet that constantly tries to kill you. You have wars against each other for sport. You swim with predators that can eat you. You explore environments that should be instantly fatal, and you shoot yourselves into space uncontrolled explosions just to see what is out there. That is a pretty good summary, Donghayan replied while checking his recording device. Though you forgot to mention that we also climb mountains during blizzards, jump out of aircraft for entertainment, and explore the deepest parts of our oceans where the pressure would crush most creatures instantly. The Vorthok were completely silent. They had spent 3,000 years terrorizing peaceful species across the galaxy. They had built their entire civilization on the idea that they were the most dangerous predators in existence. But these humans were casually describing activities that made Vorthok military training look like a pleasant vacation. Young Ho finally found his voice again. But why, he asked. Why do you do these things if they are so dangerous? So Young looked at him with genuine surprise. Because they are dangerous, she said. Because they challenge us and make us stronger. Because facing our fears and overcoming them is what makes us human. How else would we grow and learn if we always stayed safe? The Vorthek delegation stood in stunned silence as they realized that everything they thought they knew about predators and prey had just been turned upside down. These small, soft creatures were not victims waiting to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous than any Vorthek warrior. They were humans who treated danger like entertainment and viewed death as just another challenge to overcome. What happened next changed everything and showed the Vorthak exactly what kind of species they had decided to threaten. A young Vorthak warrior named Jinwoo had been listening to the conversation with growing frustration. He could not understand why his captain was allowing these tiny creatures to speak to them as equals instead of simply crushing them and moving on with the conquest. Jinwoo decided to take matters into his own claws. He would show these humans what Vorthak superiority really meant and remind them that they were nothing but prey animals waiting to be dominated. Without warning, he reached out with one massive scaled hand and grabbed So Young roughly by the arm. It was meant to be a simple display of power, a demonstration that the Vorthak could do whatever they wanted to humans, and there was nothing the smaller creatures could do to stop them. Jinwoo expected the woman to scream in terror or beg for mercy like every other species did when faced with Vorthak strength. Instead, something happened that no Vorthak had ever seen before and would never forget for the rest of their lives. Every single human in the area instantly became focused and deadly serious. The relaxed, friendly attitude that had confused the Vorthak completely vanished in less than a heartbeat. The humans transformed from curious, peaceful creatures into something that made the Vorthak warriors instinctively take steps backward. It was like watching a group of harmless animals suddenly reveal that they were actually apex predators who had just been playing with their food. Seung Woo spoke into a small communication device attached to his uniform. His voice was calm and cold and carried more genuine threat than any Vorthak battle roar ever could. "We have a hostile contact," he said without taking his eyes off Jinwoo. "Repeat, hostile contact. Weapons free, within 30 seconds, the sky above." Then filled with human aircraft that moved like nothing the Vorthak had ever seen before. These were not the slow, clumsy vessels that their intelligence reports had described. Instead, they were sleek, deadly machines that flew with the predatory grace of hunting birds. The aircraft appeared so quickly that it seemed like they had materialized out of thin air. They moved in perfect formation and took positions that gave them clear firing angles on every Vorthak in the field. The sound of their engines was a low, threatening hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground and into the bones of everyone present. But the aircraft were just the beginning. Human soldiers appeared from positions that the Vorthak had not even known existed. They rose up out of the grass like ghosts materializing from another dimension. They emerged from behind rocks and trees that had seemed completely empty just moments before. Within seconds, the 50 Vorthak warriors found themselves completely surrounded by twice as many human soldiers. Each human carried weapons that were aimed with deadly precision at weak points in Vorthak armor that the aliens had thought were impossible to target. The most terrifying thing, though, was not the weapons or the aircraft, or even the perfect tactical positioning that had appeared in less than a minute. The most terrifying thing was the look in the humans' eyes. The friendly curiosity was completely gone, replaced by something that the Vorthak recognized with growing horror. It was the same expression they saw in their own mirrors when preparing for battle. These humans had become apex predators, and they were looking at the Vorthak like prey. Jinwoo realized that he had made a terrible mistake. He could feel the focused attention of dozens of human weapons and knew that he was seconds away from death. His hand was still gripping So Young's arm, but now it felt like he was holding on to a live explosive that could detonate at any moment. "Release," Seung-woo said quietly. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more authority and threat than the loudest Vorthak war cry. Every human soldier remained perfectly still, but their weapons never wavered from their targets. Jinwoo let go of So Young's arm so quickly that he almost fell over. He had never felt fear like this before in his entire life. The Vorthak were supposed to be the ones who inspired terror in other species. They were not supposed to be the ones who were afraid. So Young straightened her clothing and smiled, but The smile did not reach her eyes. The expression was polite and professional, but underneath it was something cold and deadly that made every Vorthek in the field want to run away as fast as possible. Now you have seen what humans are like when we are angry, she said in the same calm tone she had used throughout their meeting. Would you prefer to continue this conversation peacefully? Or shall we discuss the mathematics of orbital bombardment? Tay-Min was completely confused by her words. Mathematics, he asked. What do mathematics have to do with warfare? Dong Haiyan pulled out his tablet device again and began displaying new information in the air above their group. We have calculated the energy requirements for your bombardment weapons, he said, with the same cheerful enthusiasm he had shown when analyzing Vorthek biology. Impressive firepower, but we have run some simulations. Your ships are positioned in predictable orbital patterns. We have already targeted them with our defensive systems. Impossible, Young Ho snarled, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. You have just developed spaceflight. You cannot possibly threaten our warships, cannot? We So Young asked. Tell me, have you ever heard of something called nuclear weapons? The Vorthak had not heard of nuclear weapons. They looked at each other with growing confusion and concern. These humans kept mentioning things that sounded dangerous but made no sense in the context of primitive technology. We invented them about 80 years ago, Sungwoo explained in a casual tone like he was discussing the weather. We created weapons capable of destroying entire cities, then built thousands of them. Not for conquest, but just in case we needed them. We pointed them at ourselves for decades during something we called the Cold War. The Vorthek were speechless. These creatures had built weapons capable of destroying their own civilization, and then lived with them pointed at their own heads for decades. What kind of insane species would do something so dangerous? The interesting thing about nuclear weapons, Dong Haiyan continued while showing new calculations on his tablet, is that the same technology works very well in space? The vacuum actually makes them more effective in some ways. Shall I show you the trajectory calculations for our intercontinental ballistic missiles? The holographic display above his tablet changed to show a three-dimensional map of the space around Earth. Dozens of red lines appeared showing the paths that missiles could take from the planet's surface to reach the Vorthik ships in orbit. The calculations showed precise impact times and damage estimates. They can reach your ships in approximately 14 minutes, Dong Haiyan said with scientific precision. Would you like to see the projected damage assessments? Tay-Min stared at the display in growing horror. The humans had not just been studying his ships, they had been preparing to destroy them. While he had been planning his conquest, these creatures had been quietly calculating exactly how to kill every Vorthek in the fleet. The most terrifying part was how calmly they discussed it. They were not angry or threatening, they were simply presenting facts and options like any good military strategist would do. They had turned the entire situation around without raising their voices or making dramatic gestures. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Vorthak were just beginning to understand how completely they had underestimated their intended prey. Captain Taemin felt his world crumbling around him as he realized they had made the most catastrophic mistake in Vorthik history. Everything his species believed about themselves and their place in the galaxy was being systematically destroyed by these small creatures who spoke of nuclear weapons like they were discussing farming tools. You must understand, he said desperately while trying to maintain some shred of his former authority. The Vorthak are the most feared species in the galaxy. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. Entire civilizations surrender at the mere mention of our name. Have you, So Young asked with genuine curiosity in her voice? Or have you just conquered species that were peaceful by nature? Tell me about these other species. Were they aggressive? Did they fight back? Young Ho thought about the question and realized with growing horror that he could not think of a single species they had conquered that had actually been warlike. The Trilaxians had been peaceful traders who valued commerce over conflict. The Zephyrians were artists and philosophers who barely maintained a military force. The Melkoids were simple farmers who had never developed advanced weapons. Every single Conquest had been against civilizations that chose peace over war. The Vorthak had built their reputation by bullying species that refused to fight back because violence went against their fundamental nature. They were civilized species. Taemin said, but the words sounded hollow and pathetic even to his own ears. Exactly. Sung-woo replied, and his smile became sharp and predatory. You have been bullying peaceful civilizations for 3,000 years. You avoid any species that shows aggressive tendencies. You specifically target worlds with low defensive capabilities. You are not actually apex predators. You are opportunistic hunters who pick on the weak. The words hit the Vorthak like physical blows. Their entire identity as the galaxy's most dangerous predators was being torn apart by simple logic and uncomfortable truths. They had never faced a species that was truly dangerous because they were too cowardly to take such risks. But here is the really interesting part, So Young continued, while activating a new holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. All those peaceful species you conquered, the ones who surrendered because they were too civilized to fight back effectively, humans consider them our potential friends. And humans have a very strong instinct to protect their friends. The galactic map began showing trade routes and communication networks that connected dozens of different star systems. Many of these were worlds that the Vorthak had conquered and were currently occupying with their military forces, you see. Dong Hyan added while pointing to various locations on the map. We have been monitoring galactic communications for several months now. We know about the Trilaxian resistance movements. We are aware of the Zephyrian underground networks. We have been in contact with Melkoid refugee fleets. Taemin felt something cold and terrible growing in his stomach. The humans were not just planning to defend their own world. They were talking about something far more dangerous to Vorthak. Civilization, you are threatening to liberate the galaxy. Young Ho whispered in disbelief. Liberate. So Young looked thoughtful as she considered the word. I suppose that is one way to put it. We prefer to think of it as making friends and helping neighbors. But yes, if you force us to choose between allowing bullies to terrorize peaceful civilizations or fighting back, we will fight. She gestured to the human soldiers who were still maintaining their perfect defensive positions around the Vorthak delegation. These soldiers have volunteered to fight for people they have never met on worlds they have never seen. They are willing to risk their lives to protect complete strangers simply because it is the right thing to do. The Vorthak stood in stunned silence as they processed this information. Human military doctrine was not based on conquest or domination. It was based on protection and mutual defense. They were not just facing a single world of dangerous creatures. They were facing a species that would go to war to defend others. But it gets worse for you, Sung-woo continued with obvious satisfaction. Human military strategy is not like yours. We do not rely on fear and intimidation. We use something called combined arms tactics. We coordinate multiple types of weapons and forces to achieve maximum effectiveness. The holographic display changed to show human military formations and battle plans. The Vorthak watched in fascination and growing dread as they saw how human forces moved and fought. Instead of relying on individual strength or superior technology, humans used intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. We also have something you lack, Dong Hyan said while showing new data on his tablet. We learn from our mistakes. Every battle teaches us something new. Every encounter with an enemy makes us better at fighting that type of opponent. We have been studying Vorthak tactics and weaknesses since the moment your ships appeared. The tablet display showed detailed analysis of Vorthak ship movements, weapon capabilities, and tactical patterns. The humans had been gathering intelligence and developing countermeasures while the Vorthak had been assuming easy victory. Your ships are powerful, Sung-woo admitted. But they are designed to intimidate rather than fight against determined opposition. Your weapons are effective against unarmored targets but have significant limitations against prepared defenses. Your warriors are individually strong but lack tactical flexibility. He pointed to specific weaknesses in Vorthak equipment and doctrine that the humans had identified. Your armor has weak points at the joints. Your weapons overheat after sustained firing. Your communication systems can be jammed with relatively simple electronic warfare techniques. Te-Min realized that the humans had been preparing for war while he had been planning a celebration. They had turned the tables completely, and now the Vorthak were the ones facing superior opponents who held all the advantages. There is something else you should know, So Young said quietly. Humans do not just fight when we are attacked. We fight when we see injustice anywhere in the galaxy. Those peaceful species you conquered, they have been sending us messages asking for help. She activated one final holographic display that showed dozens of communication signals coming from Vorthak-occupied worlds. Each signal was a desperate plea for assistance from species that had been living under alien occupation for decades or centuries. We have been planning this conversation for weeks, So Young continued. We knew you would come here eventually because bullies always look for new victims. We have been preparing not just to defend Earth, but to free every world you have conquered. The Vorthak delegation stood in complete shock as they realized the full scope of what they were facing. They had not just discovered a dangerous new species. They had awakened something that could destroy their entire empire, and everything they had built over 3 millennia of conquest. The galaxy's most feared predators had finally met their match, and discovered that the most dangerous creatures in the universe were the ones who fought not for conquest but for justice. The meeting that had started as a simple conquest ended 6 hours later with an agreement that shocked both species and changed the course of galactic history forever. Captain Te-Min signed documents that officially ended 3,000 years of Vorthak expansion and began the process of returning every conquered world to its original inhabitants. The Vorthak fleet would withdraw from all occupied territories within 1 standard galactic year. In exchange, humans would help establish a peacekeeping force to prevent future conflicts and ensure that no species could ever again terrorize peaceful civilizations the way the Vorthak had done. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source that no one had anticipated. As the formal negotiations were ending, several young Vorthak warriors, including Jinwoo, approached the human delegation with a request that left everyone speechless. We want to stay, Jinwoo said in broken human language that he had been practicing during the long discussions. We want to learn from humans, learn what Te-Min asked in complete confusion. Learn what from these creatures. Jinwoo looked at his captain with an expression that mixed shame and determination. How to be brave instead of just scary, he said slowly. How to protect instead of just conquer. How to survive on a world that tries to kill you and still find reasons to smile about it. The young warrior had been listening to human stories for hours and had gradually realized that everything he had been taught about strength and power was wrong. The humans were not strong because they could kill their enemies. They were strong because they chose to save their friends even when it meant risking their own lives. So Young considered this request carefully while studying the faces of the young Vorthak who had volunteered to stay behind. It will not be easy, she warned them. Human training is intense and dangerous. We will expect you to jump out of perfectly good aircraft, swim with creatures that can eat you, and climb mountains. Just because they are there? That sounds terrifying, Jinwoo admitted, and his voice shook slightly as he spoke. Can we start tomorrow? The other young Vorthak nodded eagerly, despite their obvious fear. They had seen something in the humans that they wanted for themselves. They had witnessed courage that was not based on being the biggest or strongest creature in the room. They had seen people who chose to face danger in order to protect others rather than to dominate them. Within 6 months, the first Vorthak human joint training exercises were taking place on Earth, the site of 12-foot-tall reptilian warriors. Learning to parachute from aircraft was something that no one had ever expected to see. Video recordings of Vorthak soldiers learning human military tactics became the most popular entertainment in the galaxy. The young Vorthak proved to be surprisingly good students once they overcame their initial terror of human training methods. Their natural strength and durability made them excellent rescue workers and emergency responders. They learned to use their intimidating appearance to calm disaster victims rather than Frighten them. Jin-Wu became the first Vorthek to complete human special forces training and earned the respect of instructors who had initially doubted that any alien could handle the physical and mental challenges. He learned to think of his claws and teeth as tools for saving lives rather than weapons for taking them. Within a year, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Vorthek Empire collapsed not through military defeat but through shame and embarrassment. When other species learned that the galaxy's most feared predators had been completely outmaneuvered by creatures who considered mortal danger a recreational activity, the Vorthek reputation crumbled overnight. Many older Vorthak struggled to adapt to their new reality. Taemin spent months in what humans called therapy, learning to deal with the psychological trauma of discovering that everything he believed about himself and his species had been wrong. Young Ho became an ambassador working to repair relationships with species the Vorthek had wronged, the peaceful species that had lived under Vorthek occupation for generations emerged from hiding like flowers blooming after a long winter. The Trilaxians resumed their interstellar trade networks. The Zephyrians began sharing their art and philosophy with other worlds. The Melkoids started new colonies on worlds that had been devastated by war. All of these species formed alliances with humanity based on mutual respect rather than fear. They shared technology and knowledge freely, creating a golden age of scientific and cultural advancement. The galaxy became more interconnected and cooperative than it had been in thousands of years. Human exploration. Ships began venturing into the unknown regions of space, accompanied by mixed crews of different species. The Vorthak strength, combined with Trilaxian engineering skills and Zephyrian creativity, made these expeditions far more successful than any single species could have achieved alone. So Young was promoted to admiral and given command of the first truly integrated galactic fleet. Her ships carried crews from dozens of different worlds, all working together to explore the mysteries of deep space. The same diplomatic skills that had prevented a war now helped forge lasting peace between species that had never trusted each other before. Dong Haiyan established the Galactic Institute for Comparative Biology, where scientists from every known species worked together to understand the diversity of life in the universe. His research into human psychology and behavior became required reading for anyone who wanted to understand how a species could be simultaneously peaceful and dangerous. Seung-Wu created the new Gal